Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 450 of the Health Detective Podcast. Some really cool things coming up. I don't necessarily want to spend too much time with it today, but I've been promising you guys that we would have our first in-person guests coming up soon, and that is going to be happening within the next 2 to 3 weeks, it looks like here. So I'm not exactly sure yet how long it will take us to turn those around and get those live for you guys, but I would very confidently say that within a month's time from today of this being recorded, which is September 24th, 2025, is it the 24th? Yes, it is. We will have that in-person one out for you guys. So what that will look like is, now that I live in the city of Austin, Texas, if you don't know, if you're in a major city, there's actually a lot of podcast studios that are built in major cities now. And then when people are traveling in for a conference, they can come in and use this stuff at a pretty affordable rate, and you get super high quality recordings. So obviously that's always preferred if you can. The reason we do virtual with FDN is because we can't do 3 podcasts a week in person. That wouldn't make sense to fly everyone out. I don't think we can do that yet. But we will have some in-person guests coming up soon, so I'm very excited for that. 2 quick announcements today before we get to talk to our guest. I wanted to shout out, first of all, the HSU that we have coming up. This is going to be October 4th or 5th. I really should get my dates down here. As you can tell, I'm not doing too well on my calendar. October 4th, let's say that, the first Saturday of October. That's fdntraining.com/HSU. If you are a regular podcast listener, you're going to know who I'm bringing on for that HSU. I promised we would do a little bit more with her. I actually asked you guys live if we should do more with her, and it's because of your feedback that we invited her to the HSU event. So what is it? Here is the short of it. Lori Hammer, she is someone that focuses on amino acid therapy and how it can help for mental health. If you did not get to see that episode, please go check it out. Yes, she's going to be talking about a lot of those things at HSU, but it will be more in depth, so you can kind of get an intro session if you listen to the podcast with her. Again, that's Lori Hammer like the tool. Amino acids are one of the coolest things for people with mental health issues, and we don't get to hear about this enough. It's actually kind of amazing to me that this is still not 101 knowledge in the functional healthcare space, because it's not new. I mean, even in Lori's story, she was talking about how she was getting treated with amino acid therapy when I was basically like 5 or 6 years old, and I'm about to be 30. So 25 years ago, this was already being done, and somehow it didn't take off. Now, I'm going to guess that somehow might have something to do with the fact that certain companies are not able to patent and sell exclusively the amino acids, but that's just my humble opinion. What do I know about how all of this stuff works? I could be totally wrong. So if you want a free event where she's going to give a full presentation for about an hour, hour and a half on how you can use amino acids to actually dramatically and quickly improve mental health symptoms, and that's not clickbait, that's literally what they can do. We heard that in some of her stories that she shared on the podcast itself. And then go to fdntraining.com/HSU. That's fdntraining.com/HSU. Register there. It's free, and there will be about a 30 to 45 minute Q&A included in that session. So it's a really fun time. We just sent out an email yesterday, and almost overnight, over 100 people registered for it. So I'm looking forward to hanging out with you guys live. And I'm also looking forward to hanging out with some of you in person at the HICS conference, which is going to be the weekend right after that in beautiful, sunny San Diego, California. That is October 9th through 11th. I have said this the last couple of podcasts. I'm not normally this blunt about it. I take no responsibility if tickets are sold out at this point, because I have warned you guys for at least a month now that the tickets are going to sell out. So I hope if you want to come and you're listening to this, that there are still tickets available. You scan the QR code above. If you're on audio, I don't even know if we'd be advertising it at this point, because it's, by the time this is out on audio, it's probably past the conference. However, it is HIX-live.com, HIX-live.com, and that's HIX15 at checkout for 15% off. HIX15 at checkout for 15% off. You might need to make HI and X capital for that discount to apply. I cannot wait to see you guys there. If you are planning on coming and you have not registered for the Thursday meetup at Reed's house, please let us know. He's going to kill me at this point because it started out with like 30 people registered and now we have over 80 signed up. So we can't stop it now, and we will deal with the consequences afterwards. So if you want to join us at Reed's beautiful house in Lakeside, California, please let me know. Okay, time for our guest today. I'm going to read her bio here. It's a very impressive one, and we will get into the interview right after that. So Vanessa has struggled with stomach issues, headaches, and debilitating migraines, hormonal imbalances, multiple sensitivities, and fatigue since she was a child. In college, she was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, food allergies, and had a bacterial infection that caused stomach ulcers. In 2008, she went gluten and dairy-free, which helped some of her stomach and headache issues, but continued to research to learn more about how to heal herself. Health and self-help books are her favorite genre, I can attest to that as well, and marketing and business. On the outside, she looked fine, but continued to have symptoms that compounded as the years went on. She saw multiple providers that would tell her that labs looked fine or in range, even though she struggled with so many symptoms that made daily living hard. After her fourth child, her symptoms got worse, even though she lived a fairly healthy lifestyle. She was missing how to put the pieces together to build health. She continued to research as several of her children experienced health challenges that were not helped by conventional methods. In her research, she found functional diagnostic nutrition and finally found the answers as to why she felt so bad for so long. If she's not helping others regain their health, you can find her doing home projects, gardening, oil painting, spending time outdoors, and baking healthy gluten and dairy-free treats. I'm not smiling, obviously, about the health challenges, but I am smiling when I hear yet another person that's able to find FDN and find answers to years of health challenges. So, Vanessa, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you here.
I'm happy to be here.
All right. So what's cool about your bio is it kind of gave us some insight into some of the things that you were dealing with, but humor me. I'm still going to ask the same question I would start with anyone, because I think that'll help us get this conversation going. So I'd like to know specifically, what were the first health symptoms that you dealt with? And as far as you can remember, when did they begin? I understand that we talked about a myriad of things in your bio, and it started in childhood, but I'd like to get into the specifics. So what were the first symptoms and roughly what age were they at?
Oh, like stomach aches. That was one of my biggest first things, was stomach aches and headaches that turned into migraines. And sometimes they would be so bad. Like I remember in junior high, if I had like a little bit of something, I would just be on the floor for 2 hours because my stomach hurt so bad. Or I would have migraines where I would partially lose vision in one eye, and it was just like, and my parents did the best they could. And my mom was more into more natural health things. And our pediatrician at the time, he was more open to things. But even going to different providers, it was just like, you can try this. They got my eyes checked. They, did all the things that you could think of, but it was still, things just kept progressing.
Mm-hmm. And it gets confusing at that time too, because I don't relate to it perfectly, but I actually did have these severe stomach pains and stuff as a kid. I never had the vision issues with the migraines, but I also had that. So it's kind of interesting because let's not say it now, but I'm going to take a wild guess as to some of the stuff that showed up on your GI map. Let's see how good of an FDN I am here. Even though that was probably many years apart, I would still bet that some stuff came up there. So, okay, you have good enough parents that are obviously looking into this, but they don't know what they don't know. Pediatrician means, well, they don't know what they don't know. And I like when people come in with that perspective. It's not always everyone's experience, but I do think that's the majority's experience. Most people are trying their best with the information that they have. So how did this start to progress? And I guess when did these health issues become more and more on your radar? Because I don't know if you relate to this, but I find that a lot of us that dealt with pretty severe health symptoms as kids, it's not that there's an acceptance around it. It's almost that we only think 10 minutes ahead at the time, right? Not 10 years ahead. And you kind of learn that, all right, this is just normal. This is just what I know. And again, maybe you don't resonate with that. That's kind of what I found to be the case for me. So when did the symptoms get bad enough, though, that you started to think like, okay, something really needs to be done here?
I do resonate with that. Like, I don't blame people for not knowing what they don't know. I mean, that's one thing that I see a lot of time in my life anyway, is even knowing even more now, I still recognize there's stuff I don't know. But especially with kids, I mean, I have 4 kids, and talking to other parents and other things, there are kids like even with vision problems that have vision problems, but they don't know they have vision problems because they just think it's normal not to be able to see the street sign. They just thought that was for everyone. So like as a kid, I just thought it was kind of normal, and I've always been a highly sensitive person. Like when I was going to get married, my mom told my husband, like, she is the princess and the pea. I'm very aware of like everything. But I think that's one reason why it led me, to where I am, because I'm naturally curious. I want to learn. I want to like learn the systematic things on how to fix things. Like I love puzzles. But like I kept going to different providers. So the symptoms were bad enough that I kept going to a new provider to try and get more answers. And after I got married, my husband and I went to China with his family. And that's when I had like the stomach ulcer. And when you have something where like you drink water and it feels like somebody's stabbing you in the stomach, it's like something has to be done. And so, it's like, I can't live like that.
I was about to say, yeah, that'll get you paying attention pretty quickly when you're consuming something that is needed to live, and that's not feeling so great. So I'm sorry that you went through that. And I guess then going from the bio, is it fair to say that it wasn't really until your kids' health issues got involved that we're going to dive into this super deep in terms of the natural stuff, or am I missing something there?
No, also part of my personality, and it's something I'm working on, is I tend to put myself, like as I had kids, I would, put them first. And so my health kind of took a little bit of a back burner, where it was at a point, like when I started having kids, that it was manageable. It was just my normal. I would take my thyroid medication. I knew there were certain things I couldn't eat, but I would still have like gas and bloating, and like my face would break out all the time, and I just would be tired, and a lot of different things, but I just like shoved it down there until it, you have times where it comes up and it's like, we have to do something, like kind of like what you were alluding to before.
Okay, well, I want to make sure we'll transition to that in a second, because I think I've said this a million times on the podcast. There is no better practitioner than a mom on a mission. They will figure this out one way or another. Like, it's only a matter of time. And they genuinely do make some of the most impressive practitioners I've ever met, just because of the force and the will that they have to figure things out for their kids. Again, you can't stop that. So before we get into that part, I just want to, I always like to know what people's mindset was at the time. So you did talk about how you kind of pushed down the symptoms or almost repressed it. Like, hey, like I'm not going to necessarily, focus on this right now. But certainly there must have been some thought process, especially as you became an adult, as to like what was going on. So I always am interested in what people conclude about their health. Like, did you think, hey, I just got really unlucky genetically at the time? Did you think it was abnormal that you had so many symptoms? Did you think it was just normal for you? Like, what was actually happening mentally? Because you had to notice certainly that other people were not necessarily dealing with the things that you were dealing with. So did you label it to genetics, or what was it in your head?
Probably in my head at the time, it was just like, I think this is just my normal. Like I've always had stomach aches. I've always had headaches. I guess this is my normal. And my friends that don't, that they feel fine and have all this energy, that, it was, and I have siblings that have had similar, complex health journeys as well. And we all like to learn all the things. We're very do-it-yourself kind of people. But yeah, it just was kind of acceptance in a way. Like, I guess this is my normal, and I'll just find ways to cope with it and deal with it.
I would assume anyone listening is probably outside of that, but just in case, if you are listening and you haven't gotten there yet, I encourage you to. Don't accept it as normal, right? Even if you weren't into functional healthcare type of stuff, I don't know why we would ever accept symptoms as normal. I think you probably know this about me, Vanessa. I speak in the mental health space, and one of the things I'll always tell the kids is like, this happens in mental health all the time. You go to a therapist or you take a medication and you get like 50% better, and then we just stop. I'm like, why would we stop at 50%? Like, imagine your stomach aches let's say we got them 50% better, or your migraines are 50% better. Well, I'd want to know, okay, what have I done successfully so far that's led me to getting 50% better? And then I'd have the mindset around it, well, can I never get 51% better? What about 52%? And you keep trying to just make those small steps, and you'd be surprised how far you can get. So I encourage anyone that's listening to don't accept 50% of anything or 60% of anything. Just see what else you can do. So what were some of the symptoms that your kids were dealing with? And I'm not sure if it was all your kids, but you said that they were dealing with some stuff which eventually led to FDN. I'd like to talk about what they might have been struggling with before we get to the FDN side. So what were the symptoms?
Which kid do you want to start with?
So was it all four?
My youngest one, he's around 5 or 6. He hasn't had as many things. So it's mainly the other 3. I'll just start at the top.
Sure.
That's the easiest. So one of my kids struggled with a lot of anxiety, depression, even had some more serious mental health stuff. Sorry, I'm a crier too.
It's okay.
But I've always been kind of an anxious person. So some of the things when he was younger, I just thought were normal. I just thought this is normal, but then it got to a point where it was too much. And we consulted pediatrician, psychologist, psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist wanted to treat him with medication, and the psychologist wanted to do more behavior type stuff. And my philosophy is I'm always, like you said, I always want to know more. I don't want to just take, I value professional opinion, but I also want to know like the mechanism of action and what's going on behind the scenes, like what contributed to this. And so after some of those really hard times, my husband and I did even more focused research. And one of the crazy things that came up with this kid, and like where we did some gene testing, and it turns out he has a genetic mutation where SSRIs, like a lot of SSRIs have a black box warning where they can make depression and suicidal ideations worse. And I've never been one to jump quickly to, over the counter or prescriptions, just because that's not the first tool that I want to use in my toolbox. And so we got his genes tested, did a lot of research with that. There were several significant gene mutation SNPs that, really plays into mental health. And so we changed his diet. I mean, I'm also more of a, just to give you background, more of like a crunchy person. We try to eat healthier things. My kids don't eat food dyes. We try to limit things, but we changed his diet. We took folic acid out. Some of the stuff that we did, like looking back, was kind of the principles of FDN. And that's why I think we saw so much improvement, because we were supporting him with lots of different pillars, like his diet. Like if we kept his blood sugar stable, got him eating good proteins, if he rested well, he would do a lot better mentally. If he moved his body, he really needs to be able to move his body to be able to, to help with his neurotransmitters. And then like the stress reduction. So there was a lot of things, and you can tell when some of those pillars fall that the mental part really suffers. Oh, sorry, I thought you might have a question.
No, I honestly was just sighing because I more felt bad because I think I didn't realize it was that visible. I'm sorry. When you were talking about the mental health side, especially for such a young kid, I can't help but think about, some of the things I was dealing with and stuff. And then I thank God that he had a set of parents that were aware enough that even after some stuff maybe you thought was a little bit more normal than not, that you guys had that awareness to go do something more. That is a very lucky thing to have, I think, even in 2025. Certainly it would have been a lot luckier 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, gosh forbid, 30, 40 years ago. So even though it on one end very tough that they're dealing with this, it's also amazing that they have parents that are aware of this type of stuff. So yeah, that was just one kid's health symptoms you said.
Yeah, that's just one kid.
Jeez. Okay. So what's next?
What's next? Another kid, he started having a lot of really bad, it started with stomach aches, similar to mine. And so we tried dairy-free first, and that didn't really help. He kept getting strep a lot. And then he kept getting stomach aches, and he finally was like, Mom, you have to do something about it. Because sometimes, again, we're kind of an anxious bunch at my house. Sometimes some of my kids would get stomach aches because they were anxious, so it's judging that. But he was like, you have to do something about this. So he went gluten-free, and that helped a ton. That got rid of his stomach aches. But then he started getting more and more inflammation. And our pediatrician at the time was like, just give him some Miralax, that will probably help. And I was like, again, that's not going to be the first tool I pull out of my tool belt. It's not just, he's not suffering from a Miralax deficiency. That's not why he has a stomach ache. Like, why does he have a stomach ache? So we changed pediatricians. And thank heaven we have a pediatrician that is really great. He's more open to a lot of different things and research. Like, he loves to read books. Oftentimes we sit and chat about things. And he ended up getting diagnosed with PANS and PANDAS. And so he was my main kid that really drove me to FDN, because it was like, something is going on. And like, okay, we recognize he's got PANS, PANDAS, but why? Like, what can we do to help? And we tried a lot of different things, and it just wasn't helping. And that's what led me to FDN, because we had seen another holistic practitioner, and it was just going to be something where they weren't very transparent with the protocol and how they wanted to go forward. And that's when I was like, I am passionate about health. I love puzzles. I'm going to do my own research. And that's what brought me to FDN, because it was like, wow, FDN is something that has, like, I'm a geeky kind of person. Like, I love math. I love numbers. And that's why I loved FDN. Like, I remember hearing you, it was 5 and 5. And you were talking about labs, the labs. And I was just like, oh, I love like data in labs and things I can measure, and it's like, and holistic health together with numbers. It was like, okay, yes, sign me up.
It's definitely a niche within a niche, but if you're about it, you're about it. And for the people that find it, they're like, yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for. I'll never forget, Jen Maleka by any chance? Have you seen her in some stuff?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Jen, when I talked to her 9 years ago now, almost on the phone, I can't remember the rest of the conversation. I just remember her laughing at this, and now I get why she laughed. She had asked what I was looking for, and I said, I just feel like I'm kind of playing a guessing game, and I need some more objective data for my health. And remember, guys, this is before FDN had any marketing stuff, so FDN had like a basic website. You didn't really know what it was. And I just remember on the phone, she just laughed. And I guess why she was laughing is because she's thinking in her head, you're in the perfect place. And clearly she was right. So I think we'd be filling a stereotype here and about leaving out the last kid if we went to FDN first and didn't talk about the health symptoms of the fourth child, because you said it was 3 out of the 4. So yeah. I don't want to leave the newest board hanging. What happened health-wise with the fourth kid? And then we'll get into the FDN side of things.
Ever since he was little, he had a hard time sleeping. And he's one of the most anxious of my children. Had a lot of sleep issues. Turns out a lot of primitive reflexes that hadn't been integrated. Like, when I have a problem, I'm like, I have to deep dive into everything to know how to help them. But also turns out a lot of my kids have a lot of histamines, like histamine buildup, which kind of plays into some of their genetic, some of those SNPs that play together with each other. And so really helping, and he had really bad allergies too. Like, certain times of the year, it would be horrible, itchy, basic allergies, like itchy everywhere, sneezing, coughing, and even giving him over-the-counter medications just was not cutting it. And it's like, well, then when I went through FDN, it was like, oh, wow, there's so many things I can systematically do to help you with so many of your symptoms, but we're getting more at the root cause of the problem so you don't have these symptoms.
And you had mentioned in your bio when your fourth child was born, you also started to get some health symptoms moving again, right, as well?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
more like horrible fatigue. I had like kidney stones a couple times. That wasn't fun. But a lot of it was just like the brain fog and the fatigue. I just felt like I was drowning because I didn't have any energy to do the things that I actually wanted to do. So that's why it was so amazing when I went through the program that they make you do the labs on yourself, and that was one thing I am so glad they included. I probably wouldn't have paid extra because at the time I was just focused on like, what can I do for my kids, not for myself, which is stupid. I probably should have put my oxygen mask on first.
Well said.
I was so grateful that they had that included because it opened my eyes as to why I was feeling horrible. Like other lab tests were like, oh, wow, you are the picture of health. You look amazing. It's like, but I don't feel amazing. I feel horrible. I feel tired. I feel like I have no energy to do basic things for my kids, and then going through the FDN program opened my eyes to all of those different healing opportunities. And it's like when I started addressing those, it was just like transformational because I felt so much better. It's like I actually have the energy, I can do these things, and I'm actually fixing stuff at the root cause instead of just treating a symptom and hoping it will go away.
Great. For those that don't know what Vanessa was referencing, so when you go through FDN, if you were to go through as a practitioner, we do include our foundational tests that we teach in the cost of tuition. And just so you know, that wasn't even always true. When I went through 8.5, 9 years ago now, it was 2 labs included in the cost of tuition, and then you would have to pay separately for the other ones. And I am so glad, Vanessa, that they've done what they've done now, because you're right. When you make an investment into something, if you're on a payment plan, pay in full, whatever it might be, our minds just psychologically, we don't want to pay for anything more at that time when we've already done something. So it's amazing to me that not only are they included, but this is kind of a risk on the FDN side, but we do it. Even if someone's on that 24-month payment plan, we still include the labs and the tuition. And you can technically, if you ran through the course fast, you could be running them before you've even spent enough to justify it for FDN. So we have full faith in the practitioners, and we're like, let's just get this done for you guys. So I promise we are going to get into the specifics. I'd love to know what we found on the labs and stuff. There's only one more question I have before that. I don't understand something yet. So you were working with these various health practitioners, not getting the results that you wanted. Okay, that's pretty standard. You found FDN. You were looking at the workshops and stuff. But I'm just curious, was this like Google search that found FDN? Did you know anyone who went through? I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how do you end up on one of our workshops? Because unless we ran an ad directly to you, usually you heard about it through someone else. So I don't know if you remember that, but how did you find us exactly?
It was a lot of just researching online. So I was looking at like IIN, the nutritional, the NTA. I was looking at a lot of different programs. And so it was just like, I want to know what all my options are. And so then I like found a couple of blogs, read a bunch of stuff. And then when it was like, oh, you could do this workshop and know more, it was like, okay, great. I will do that because I would love to know more. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's figure out what that more was. So when you go through the course, like we said, you get those labs and you're going to go over your results over a couple of sessions while you're in the course itself. So I would like to know for you specifically, what were some of the major findings on the labs? And I will remember I put this in the beginning, so I'll throw my guess here now. I'd be shocked to find that there wasn't H. pylori on the GI map. I could be wrong. I don't know, but I'd be shocked to find that that wasn't a case for you. So in addition to probably that, let me know some of the other major findings and let me know if I'm correct here or not.
Yeah. H. pylori was on there, which I wasn't super surprised because back when I had in college, when I had a stomach ulcer, I had H. pylori. Mm-hmm. And at that time it was treated with antibiotics. But so there was H. pylori, there was parasites. My balance of bacteria actually looked pretty good, but I did have a lot of like a hard time breaking down proteins. So like digestion was impaired. And there were some things where I thought might look worse, like some of the stuff for liver health, but I also sauna a lot, do castor oil packs. So I think I had been supporting my body in that way, so that didn't show up. Let's see, what else was it? I mean, those were like the biggest things, because especially when we did, and then my hormones were like crazy. Like all of where they shouldn't be. My cortisol was like super high in the mornings. It was like I was waking up super stressed, but sometimes, that can be part of like parasites and other things. And then you could see like I was just having a hard time, having energy the rest of the day, because it was super high in the morning and then just kind of went down.
Even though some of the stuff wasn't surprising to you, I'm hoping, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it validating though to finally get some lab test results that reflected how you have felt for a while?
Oh, 100%. And even just knowing, like, if anything about the H. pylori and the parasite, it's like that gave me so much actionable information to help with other things. And then going through that results and recommendations session with the mentor, guiding me through it was great, because it was like, these are some things you should do to support yourself. And it's like, when you support this, then you're supporting all these other systems, and then things, slowly get better all around, when you're really dealing with those big healing opportunities.
So what kind of progress did you make? What did you have to change immediately, if you could change anything at all, to start getting yourself back on track? And then I'd like to also talk about your kids and what you've been able to change for them
Yep.
while and since going through FDN. So let's start with you first, and hopefully what's improved there, and then we can talk about them.
Yeah, the biggest stuff was a lot of the gut healing stuff. So for me personally, and everybody's different, but for me personally, promoting bile was huge. That not only helped with hormones, but my gut and digestion, taking digestive enzymes helped a ton. And then slowly working on that pathogen eradication. But it's like I had to build myself up before I was able to do that, because if I had just jumped into that pathogen eradication, then I would just be a puddle on the floor. Like I didn't have the vital reserve to do that. So it was so nice to have an actionable plan. Like, this is what you do first. And then when you have the vital reserve to do it, then you can work on these other things, and that's why I loved it, because it was systematic, and it's slow, it's those little daily actions you do every day, but it compounds, and then you suddenly get to a point, it's like a curve where here you're kind of feeling the same, and then suddenly you get to a point where it's like, oh my goodness, I feel so much better.
And most of us don't. I mean, in our case, it's a little bit different because we were sick, or at least symptomatic, at an early age, right? But we can still see this steady progression in both of our health stories over many years, if not a couple of decades. So we always have to remember that and keep that in perspective when we're in this functional approach, or doing this functional approach. It is, if anything, just a blessing that we even can get to some level of normalcy after many of us have been sick for this long. Because if we've been sick for this long, it was unintentional, of course, but it does mean that we've been doing the wrong things for many, many years. So it's crazy to me that the body can even hold on for that long, let alone say, okay, cool, now we're finally able to do the right things. So sure, I can readjust this for you and you can start to feel a lot better. I flip it that way and I say that's an amazing thing. So it is cool that we can even make that progress. Now, probably most importantly to you, I'd love to talk about the kids here, because it does sound, especially like two of them, there are some pretty severe things there. So we're not expecting magic overnight. I think you had, if I remember correctly, you had graduated in January of this year. So it's been 9 months, but again, dealing with kids, that's a whole process as well. So what progress have we made for the 3 kiddos that are sick?
Yeah. So a lot of them, it's been a lot of gut healing, supporting some of their underlying conditions. And for a lot of them too, and this is one thing that I feel more passionate about too, and that's why I loved FDN, because it includes it in part of the DRESS program, is that stress reduction. And I'm guilty myself. Before I was like, yeah, stress reduction, whatever, like meditate, change your, I kind of just blew it off in a way where I didn't fully understand how important that was, because if you have a dysregulated nervous system, then your body, like, you can be doing all the right things, and then your body doesn't feel safe enough to accept those inputs. So that was one of the really key things for my kids, because it's like, okay, they may have, like one of them has a parasite and also has H. pylori. So it's like, okay, but why do they have these? Why was their body a great host for these things to take place? Because we're exposed to all sorts of things in our life, like we have been for thousands of years. But why is their body a place where that can, take charge and start wreaking havoc? And a lot of that goes back to the nervous system regulation. And so it's like, if you've got trauma, toxins, and your thoughts, those are really three big things that can really influence that. And so with all my children, working with the FDN method, like having the dress program for them has been really helpful, but also just like that nervous system regulation has been huge for them.
I want to talk about how the heck we get kids to do that, because that's probably a separate conversation. But I have to throw in here, because I've never really said this on the podcast before. So this is an EV theory. It might be an EV crackpot theory. We'll find out later, but it's an EV theory nonetheless. And so this conversation, I'm sure you've seen the space evolve, even though, you've only been in it for so much time, I guess, but you're starting to see the space evolve in terms of the nervous system dysregulation is being talked about more and more and more. And for those of you that are fellow personality test junkies like myself, you might have heard of the Big Five, Myers-Briggs, all that kind of stuff. So the Big Five, and I'm getting somewhere with this, I promise. The Big Five is the most scientifically validated. It's not even a question. The other ones are more fun than anything, but they're not actually statistically backed. And the Big Five came from a 5-factor model where we did a factor analysis on all personality traits, and there's basically 5 that make up all humans. And then you kind of have a place where you fall on that spectrum. And so we're not going to talk about all 5 today, but one of them is neuroticism. And neuroticism, none of these things are good and bad, by the way. There's no good if it's high, bad if it's low, or vice versa. It's how would this have been used in our environment at one point or another? And you can pass down a lot of these things genetically, not entirely, but a lot of them do have a high level of heritability. So with neuroticism, for example, we believe that one of the reasons some people would be more neurotic, more prone to negative emotion, more alert, and kind of sensitive to the environment is, think about it, it would have protected us. Maybe we have a genetic lineage that, for whatever reason, was in a highly stressful environment, and it was advantageous to be the person that was alert, to be the person that double-checked everything, to be the person that felt loss a little deeper. And my possibly crackpot theory with this is, we know that women on average score higher in neuroticism. And this space is made up by women, right? I'm a man in this space, but I am not the norm. It is overrepresented with women. And I think the reason that they're higher in neuroticism is actually for protection of children. This is why most people would trust a woman more with their kids than some random dude. It's because we know that they care so much. They even care about other people's kids. It's like hardwired in. And what's funny, though, is just because women have higher on average does not mean men are never high in it. So when I test, I'm in this space, but I also score very high on neuroticism naturally, enough so that if you adjusted it for gender, I'm actually way higher than the average male. And so the reason I felt compelled to bring that up today is because I love what you said about it takes such a deep level of investigation to realize what's happening to these kids? What was happening to me? Why is this happening at such a young age? And you said something like, how did he become a host for H. pylori? How did he become a good host for the parasites? And I truly think what might be happening to some of our people that end up on this podcast, or some of their kids, or even myself, is you start out with maybe some genetics that lead you to being more anxious, more a little stressed than the average person, which certainly I would have been as a kid. And you know as well as me what happens when we're in that hyper-stressed state. Our adrenaline's going. When the adrenaline's going, that digestive function's not working as well. And then we have the most toxic environment that's ever existed. So you got a kid whose immune system's not fully developed yet. You might have some traits that make them a little more stressed than others. And now good luck, because you're exposed to glyphosate, toxic foods, frankenfoods, the same bacteria and parasites that our ancestors would have been exposed to. And we end up becoming great hosts for this. So I just appreciate you bringing this up because it's an evolution that I'm going through in my own mindset where I'm like, how am I healthier now? Even though I'll always be transparent with you guys, I would not say I'm doing my health habits as perfectly as I once was, and yet I'm healthier than I was before. How is that happening? And then I think back and I'm like, well, Ev, when you first started this health journey, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm learning these cool healing habits. Maybe you can relate to this, Vanessa. It was like everything needs to be done this way. So, oh, I have to block blue light. We're never not going to have the glasses on after the sun sets. Like it was crazy how strict everything was. So I was applying that same mindset that probably led to me being a good host for some of these nasty things to my healing journey. And when you have high stress controlling your healing journey, you might make some progress. And I did. But I think that's how a lot of us that end up being stuck with those 20 to 30% symptoms left over. I do believe that's what's happening. So forgive me for my long-winded spiel. I try not to do that on the podcast, but this is just something I've been thinking about lately. And when you talk to me about 3 out of 4 kids all getting this stuff so early, it's like, yeah, you could say maybe it's some genetic SNPs and stuff like that. But I wonder, are they just prone to being a little more, stressed than average, and that makes them this good host for these other things? So, with that said, how on earth do you begin to get a child to regulate their nervous system? Because most adults can't do that or are unwilling to do it. So, how are you working on that with your kids?
There's a few different approaches because, like everyone, like every human being, we're all different. And there's going to be different things that resonate with different people. Even the same person will resonate with something different at a different point in their life, right? So, part of it is meeting the child where they are, doing things like the mindful things. Like even last night, my kid that's really anxious was freaking out because he missed something, And so we practice being mindful. And I don't know if you've done the positive intelligence program or read that book.
I'll add it to the list. No.
Oh, it's great. I just finished it with some other FDNs. But basically, it goes through, hypervigilant. You go through and you have these different saboteurs, okay? And a lot of them they all serve a purpose to keep you safe. But then when you let it go to the other side, like when they take over, that's when you you're too hypervigilant or you're too neurotic about things where it served its purpose, but you haven't brought it, you haven't kept it in check. So part of that whole program is recognizing, bringing awareness to your saboteurs and then activating your sage brain. But I'm sorry, that was kind of sidetracking. But with my kids, some of them really like being mindful, grounding outside. And then some of them, it's too much for them. And that's another thing which I love about health and being in this space is, and just as a mother, there are different things I feel like you're guided to that your family needs at that point. And I found this, I don't know if you're super familiar with like vagus nerve stimulation. There's a lot of things you can do yourself, like gargling, singing, humming, to help stimulate the vagus nerve. Some of my kids will do that naturally. Some of them like to hum, some of them like to sing, and like moving their body, and some don't really. And so I found this device, which was invented by a physical therapist that's local to us. And I ended up meeting him at the Energy Healing Conference, and he even visited one of my kids after he broke his leg. But it's a multi-tool for your body. It has the vagus nerve stimulation. And for some of my kids that won't do like the free, easy stuff you could do, getting them to do that calms them down so where they're a space where they're open to other things. So that's been like a phenomenal tool for our family. And it's an investment for sure, but it's one thing that like one of my kids, I have seen such a huge difference, in different things. And it can also help with integrating primitive reflexes. I don't know if you're familiar with primitive reflexes.
No, the vagus nerve one I would have been more familiar with, but the primitive reflexes, no. I think the first time I've heard that as a phrase was earlier in the podcast when you said it.
Yeah. So one of my kids has dyslexia and dysgraphia, and I suspected it like when he was in first grade. I said there's something different. He doesn't read the same as the kids, and they were always like, "Oh, it was COVID." I'm like, no, something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Took 2.5 years to finally get a diagnosis.
Jeez.
But a lot of kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia have a hard time, or a lot of them have retained primitive reflexes. So their primitive reflexes are different reflexes that you're born with. And as you go through movement like crawling, there's a lot of different ones. They naturally integrate as you develop. But if you experience trauma or exposed to different toxins, they can disintegrate and they're not fully integrated. So you can have dysfunction in a lot of different areas. And so with the child that has dyslexia and dysgraphia, integrating his primitive reflexes while working on some of the toxins and other, his physiologic, like addressing the other things within the FDN framework, like addressing toxins and gut pathogens and other things. It's synergistic because it helps it integrate faster. Because you can work on primitive reflexes all day, and it's a slow game. There's different exercises you do to help reintegrate them. But if you have like parasites, it's going to slow that or prevent those from integrating. And what's cool about this device, it's called like a Resimax pain tuner, is it goes through 3,000 different points on the harmonic scale, which is, it's basically like an electric tuning fork. But if you can get a good balance between your vagus nerve and your trigeminal nerve, which is like cranial nerves 5 and 10, you can get your body in a place where it feels safe.
Okay.
So for a couple of my kids, that has been transformational because they were not open to all of the, a lot of the easy, lower hanging fruit for nervous system regulation.
Well, two things. I'm like, should I say this? I will say this. So I'm glad that you specified the primitive reflexes thing, because remember, you get this, you're on right now. You got to play it cool when you're live. But when you first said that, I'm like, primitive reflex, what is this kid like fighting everyone or so? Like, I thought you literally meant primitive. So I was wondering what the heck that meant. So thank you for explaining that at the end. In terms of the device itself, I know that you said maybe they're not willing to do some of the easier stuff, things that we would consider easy, the humming, gargling, whatever it might be. This device sounds pretty simple, though. Am I wrong? Is this just as simple as like holding it up to something on your body?
Yes, absolutely. So I should have brought it. It basically kind of looks like an electric toothbrush, and it has wings on the side, which are modeled after like a gua sha. I don't know if you're familiar, like women, it's, like an ancient thing for scraping fascia.
Yes, only because of my acupuncturist do I know that.
Okay, yeah. So it has wings on the side, and then it has different attachments on the top. So the main attachment is like 2 forks, and you can put it here, and it goes in and out. You can change it. So you can put it here, and there's a lot of different, like they call them recipes. So depending on what you've got going on. But even if you just did like the vagus nerve and then the trigeminal nerve back here, that itself, for 5 to 10 minutes a day, it makes such a big difference. And you can see, like I've seen the inflammation in my kid with PANS pandas come down when he uses it consistently.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something that I'm like, this is like the coolest tool I've ever seen. It has so many different applications, and you can use it for scraping too, like on the feet. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, it helps your body to reorganize, especially if you have a kid, like one of my kids has kind of some executive function issues. And so when you can scrape their feet, it's bringing more awareness, and it helps them feel grounded so they know where they are, like in time and space. Another really cool, I'm sorry about this tangent, but another really awesome thing is my oldest, last year, he broke his leg skiing. It was so bad that it was like displaced, and they had to push it back. And he was in a long leg cast for a long time, then a short leg cast, then a boot. And even 15 months later, it hadn't fully healed on his tibia. There was still a little bone callus.
You said 15 months later?
Yeah, 15 months. And then he wasn't even doing anything crazy, and he rebroke it. So it was, it was like we're all in shock. Like, how did this happen again? Like, I thought when somebody came to my house, they said, I think Ev broke his leg again. I thought they were joking. And so he had to have surgery this time. But we use the Resimax because there are different vibrations that can heal bone. And there have been some studies that a certain frequency can help heal bone 66% faster. So we're like, you're laying there anywhere, just stick the Resimax next to you. So we just stuck it next to his leg. And the difference in his x-ray in 28 days, like the amount of healing that happened, I mean, we'd also put it on his vagus nerve to, tell his body he's safe, he hadn't had that much healing in 6 months before.
Wow.
It was incredible. So like his body felt safe with some of that vagus nerve stimulation, and then the vibration on his bone helped heal it faster.
And I'd have to imagine you're probably bypassing placebo with that, because I don't think he would be like, this is more something he's doing because you guys are telling him to do it, not because he's like, oh yes, this magic wand here is going to fix my leg.
Yeah. Well, and they've also had studies with it. They've had like a headache study. So okay. they gave people a sham device, so made the sounds but didn't actually have the same stuff. And they had I'm pretty sure it was a double-blind study. I can't remember. But they did a headache study, and it was proven to help people with headaches, like tension headaches.
Where can people find that?
It's on resimax.com. And it's like the guy that invented it. I ended up meeting him at the end. I met him again at the Energy Healing Conference because I just kept getting this feeling that we should get one for him after he broke his leg. We'd been introduced to it by our chiropractor and muscle guy. And at first, when we rented it from him, we didn't really know what it was about. And it's been like the biggest blessing. Anything I'm like, oh, take the Resimax, like use the Resimax on it. Or even when after my son got out of surgery, he was all backed up because, they give you all the drugs when you have surgery. And we put it on the red mode, and put it on his stomach. And within 15 minutes, he went to the bathroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Pretty incredible.
All right. Well, I encourage you guys to check that out. I'm looking at my time here. I'm like, this is classic F, right? I actually warned her about this off air. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to shout out what you do and who you work with and stuff. So sorry for kind of a rough transition here, but we're going to do it. So Vanessa, now obviously you are an FDN and you work with other people. So for those that are like, okay, this story totally resonates with me. My kids have all this stuff going on and they'd like to work with you. Do you work with kids? Do you work with moms? Is it a little bit of both? So in other words, I'd like to know, who is your ideal client where you're like, this is the exact type of person I like to be able to help?
Yeah, kids and moms, because I've been there and I have a lot of experience with my kids and other people. Even some of my friends, when their kids have something wrong, they're like, why don't you just call Vanessa? She's like a doctor.
That is pretty cool. So where can they find you if they would like to work with you or learn more?
Yeah, you can go to my website, roushfunctionalhealth.com, or Instagram. It's the same, Roush Functional Health. And, send me a message. We can talk, see if we'd be a good fit, because I'm big on people, resonating with each other to be able to work well.
Amazing. All right. I want to ask you our signature question on the show today to finish this up. And it would be, if we could give you a magic wand, so not the Resi thing, but a literal magic wand here. And you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. So that means you can get us all to start doing one thing, or you can get us all to stop doing one thing for our health. What is the one thing Vanessa gets us to do?
I would get you to work on nervous system regulation or mindset, because that was a huge missing piece too for myself. Going through a lot of things, and with any situation in your life. I don't know if you've ever heard, sorry, I'm making this long. I go off on tangents. But I don't know if you've ever heard of, there's an old Chinese story about the farmer. Have you ever heard that story?
I feel like I know a few about the farmer, so please tell us.
Well, it's basically like this farmer, and he like has a bunch of wild horses come to his property and they're like, oh, how lucky. And he says, we'll see. And then the horses go away and, you know, they're like, oh, how unlucky. And then his son breaks his leg and then they come back and they're like, oh, lucky. And he says, we'll see. And then his son breaks his leg and they're like, oh, how unlucky. And he says, we'll see. And then a war breaks out and his son can't go to war. And they're like, how lucky. And really with any situation in your life, and this is one thing that I really resonated with me when I went through that positive intelligence training and coaching, is that any circumstance that you're in, even if it's super hard, like, you know, we have a lot of hard stuff in our life. We've been through a lot of hard things, you know, especially mental health things. But in any situation, you can choose to accept it for now, or you can choose to convert it to a gift in the future. You know, like for a long time, I would think, why do I have these horrible health problems? Why do my kids have all these weird health things? You know, like this isn't fair. But I could choose it as a gift and saying, wow, look at all this knowledge it has given me and how I'm connecting to other people that need help too. So I can choose to convert it into a gift, to see it as, you know, a positive instead of a negative. And the more you see those positive things, like neuroscience tells us, the more you look for the positive, the more your brain will be like, oh, okay, we're finding positive stuff.
I hope people, man, we got to do a whole separate podcast on that together, because I'm glad that we're leaving off on that, but I hope people take that as seriously as I know that you mean it, because some people don't take that well, right? Like, it's like, all right, well, you don't know about my situation. And it's like, no. If your situation's bad, you probably want to even apply this more. So we might have to part two that. With this said, and with all that said, guys, if you enjoyed this today, if you could drop a thank you for Vanessa in the chat, we would love that. And please remember that you can go find her on Instagram and her website. If you are on audio listening to this once it's out there, this would not apply right now when it was recorded live, because we just finished the episode. You can go to fdntraining.com/450, fdntraining.com/450, and you'll be able to see all of her links and some additional stuff from the podcast there. Vanessa, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on today. I hate when I hear the stories about the people that are going through this to some degree, but the flip side of it is, here's the mindset stuff, right? Those moms on a mission, like I said, they make the best practitioners. They end up having the largest businesses, and it's not about the money side of the business. That's not what I mean. I mean, they impact the most people, because you just cannot stop them once they learn about this stuff. So I am extremely excited about what will continue to happen for your family and what you continue to do. So I'm looking forward to talking to you in another year and seeing what happens then.
Yeah. And we'll have to do maybe a podcast sometime about all the mind stuff. Because I'm like, I've read I'm like, I could talk about that for hours.